what I mean by sleeping through the night is about 6 to 8 hours in a stretch. And I want to explain how we do this without crying it out. So I let them drift off to sleep that way. And then once they're asleep, I slide them over right next to me. And this is the controversial part.
Howdy, folks. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, you and I have the great privilege of listening to my beautiful wife, Catherine Joy Vogtberg, talk about what she does to sleep train our children. We are on baby number 6 right now with sleep training, and I will be the first to attest to Katie's philosophy and strategies. They are effective. I'm sleeping great. Katie seems to be sleeping great. I'll let her speak for herself. And I'm going to let her speak for herself. And so with that said, we're going to get this thing rolling. But before we do, I want to thank each and every one of you that have taken the time to leave a rating or a review on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to our podcast. That is what grows our podcast, is you taking the time to do that, to leave a rating or review, or to share our podcast with friends. It is so fun to hear about how our podcast has reached new people simply by the old-fashioned word of mouth. And so thank you to those of you that have shared it with a friend. And if you're one of those people that hasn't done that, maybe you can think of an episode that would benefit one of your friends or that your friends or family members might enjoy and send that to them. We would appreciate that. And if you watch us on YouTube, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Okay, we will now get this thing going.
The Now That We're a Family podcast.
Okay, so what I mean by sleeping through the night is about 6 to 8 hours in a stretch. So Lyman here is what, 9 weeks?
Yeah, 9 weeks.
9 weeks. And he's been sleeping 8-hour stretches during the night for a couple weeks now, which is a huge blessing. And I want to explain how we do this without crying it out, because I think as soon as people hear sleep training, they associate it with crying, wailing infants. And I will say we learned a few things after the first 3 children. It has gotten so smooth. And Lyman, my last 3 actually, go to sleep without crying at all, ever. There's never any crying for 1 minute. And so that doesn't stress me out. It's wonderful. And so I want to go into that a little bit today, but there are a couple things I want to mention first. First of all, we only have 25 copies of the magazine left for the spring issue. So if you guys want to get your issue for the spring magazine, now's the time. There's 25 copies left, so you can click below to snag yours. And then the other thing is, I run the Get It All Done Club, which is a program for mothers to help mothers go from drowning in motherhood to thriving in motherhood. This year has been a wild year for me. But I will say so many of the things that we talk about in the Get It All Done Club have helped to make each place that we have lived in this year feel like a home and feel as functional as possible. So anyways, there will be a masterclass down below too, if you want to check out kind of how I teach, what it looks like, and have some takeaways to apply to your life right now for free. So anyways, those are some things I want to talk about.
Nice. Did you say Mr. Class?
Oh,
what did you
Elisha,
say there? I want some specification.
I thought about stopping and I was like, no, we'll just keep going. But Elisha doesn't let me miss.
I'm assuming you were talking about your masterclass, the free masterclass.
Yes, okay. I'm talking about.
I should have just trusted my instincts there. My gut was leading me well. I'm going to say one more thing, Katie, before you jump into this.
Yes.
Because it is rather time sensitive, and this isn't one of our programs. This is not something that we put on, but it is the Newlywed Retreat that Katie's parents put on. And this is our favorite marriage event really that we've ever been to. And it is now open for enrollment. There is an early bird price that lasts through the end of, through the end of the month. And so through the end of March. So the Newlywed Retreat, Katie and I went to our first year of marriage. We absolutely loved it. We love Katie's parents. They're our favorite marriage coaches. And so if you want to learn more about that, we'll link that below as well. It's in Central Oregon. This is a on-site, in-person event. It's a really fun size. The group that you get to be with it just seems like the perfect size. It's kind of a workshop format, and we cannot recommend the Newlywed Workshop enough. And so we'll link that below.
There you go. Wow, we had a lot of stuff to talk about
Yeah.
today, man. 20 minutes later. All right. So I think often when people hear sleep training, they apply what they know of sleep training, a 9-month-old, 2-year-old, whatever the case may be, but a later child to a newborn. And I've heard some stories of women who do this, and it does seem like it's a very traumatic process for the mother, and it can be very hard on the child because they're having to transition from a schedule that they know and love. And that is not what we're talking about here, because it's really just getting children onto a new schedule and a new rhythm and doing that in a very gentle way. And if you start when they are newborns, then you don't have to go through that kind of stark transitioning process. And eventually we're all going to transition our children into their own beds. Even if you're the most attached parent, at some point your child will not be in the bed with you. And so there will be a transitioning process. And the earlier you start that, I found, the easier it can be for the child and the mama. I wrote down a ton of notes here because I wanted to give you guys, sometimes when you're postpartum, your brain's kind of foggy and you're like, what did I do? What do I not do? I want to hit on all the key points.
You always seem sharp as a tack, postpartum or not.
Thank you.
Especially when you're saying your words.
Yes. Okay.
I'm teasing you. You are always sharp as a tack.
Okay, so we're going to break this down. So day 1 through 3, I feed every 2 to 3 hours. And this is whenever the baby is hungry. Just feed them. You're trying to get your milk to come in. You want that strong milk supply, and baby needs to gain weight. So this is even when baby is sleeping during the day or at night. I don't let them go longer than 3 hours in a stretch. And because we've had some lightweight babies, we've had a 5-pounder and a 6-pounder, they are very lethargic. And so they will sleep for very long stretches, but it's not because it's good for them to do that. It's because they don't have energy. So they need to get energy through their food. So day 1 through 3, I'm essentially nursing on demand. And if the baby isn't demanding it, then I'm demanding that the baby eat. And then so this is something that I found is easier during these first days, 1 through 3, is I side nurse in bed. I wasn't able to do this with my first 3. It just seemed like too much coordination. But in the evenings when I'm able to do this, I let the baby fall asleep against me when they're done nursing. So I'll nurse one side, burp, nurse the other side, and then take them off and have my shirt down so they know, hey, so I let them nothing else is coming. And then just let them snuggle against me. And I have found that I'm not getting great sleep during this time, but they are so comforted being with mommy. And because they were in my womb that way, they usually can be wide awake and they will still be relaxed and comfortable. So I let them drift off to sleep that way. And then once they're asleep, I slide them over right next to me. And this is the controversial part.
Okay. Well, okay. Let's hear it.
Okay. So I just have to say that I do this in a way that works for me. Okay. And this is what worked for my mom with 11 kids. Some of this I do on my own, okay? Like the nursing in bed and stuff.
I'm on pins and needles here. This is
yeah, you're just dying to know.
The suspense is killing me. I don't even know how controversial you are.
So this is what works for me. And I move the baby onto their tummy. All my babies have been tummy sleepers. And I totally understand why doctors, it's easier for them to be black and white and say, hey, don't sleep a baby on their tummy. Because yes, babies can suffocate. There are just unwise parents out there. But if you're a very intentional parent, there's a way that you can do this in a way that's not going to harm anybody. And there's a few reasons why I like to sleep babies on their tummy. The first is there's no gas. Like if they have a burp and they need to get that gas out, it feels very good to them for them to have that pressure on their stomach when they're laying there. Also, they're able to find their fingers and kind of suck on them and comfort themselves that way. And also, that startle effect. So this is often why we swaddle babies, is because they wake up and they startle themselves when they move their hands. Well, when they're laying flat on their tummy, they can't do that. They can't startle. And so they're just very comforted and they don't startle themselves awake. I don't love to swaddle, honestly, because not only is that another transition down the road to take them out of the swaddle, but it made me uncomfortable when babies, I have swaddled a couple of ours, and when they started to come out of their swaddle, it seemed like a suffocation hazard. It was like I never quite knew when they were going to burst out of the chrysanthemum?
Is that what it's called?
The chrysalis. I think that's what it's called. And so that seemed like a suffocation hazard to me as well. And so we just skipped the swaddle and slept the babies on their tummy.
Man, I'm just going to cover our bases here. You're not advocating for people to sleep their babies on their bellies if they're not comfortable with that. Is that correct?
No, I'm not advocating to do anything if you're not comfortable with it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying what works in our home. And this is how I get my babies to sleep through the night at 6 to 8 weeks. Okay. I'm not saying any of this is a good idea.
Yeah. It's just worked for us,
It's just worked. And so by golly, I'm going to keep doing it. Okay. But I'm not saying do this. I recommend this with your babies. You know your situation, you know what you're comfortable with. And that's just, yeah.
And I even think of myself, there are certain things where I would way rather sacrifice sleep for the peace of mind.
Yeah.
And so those mothers and those fathers probably know themselves in that situation. And that just might be something that you're willing to accept, knowing that maybe there is there's a better way to optimize sleep or whatnot, but they might be willing to just sacrifice sleep for the sake of doing something they're more comfortable with.
I've got Elisha scared over here.
Well, I didn't know that was controversial.
Really?
No.
Yeah. I didn't know it was a big deal until I shared this after Leon, our first. And I shared that he was a tummy sleeper. And I had some gals saying, you're encouraging other people to kill their babies.
Well,
it's very dramatic.
Yeah, see, that's what I want to make sure people know that we're not doing. We're not encouraging any
I'm not
baby
encouraging
killing.
you to do anything of the kind. And if it goes against your conscience, don't do it for sure. So another tip is I would recommend changing the baby's diaper in between feedings, in between sides. So like nurse one side, change their diaper. If they've spit up, change their clothes, do whatever you need to do so that after that last feeding.
Nice. I like it. They can just doze right off or something.
This method, I've honestly never heard about my method.
Okay.
Because
you trademarked this?
Yes, I've trademarked this. Well, I feel like it's a combination. Like I don't technically co-sleep, but it's like this combination of like co-sleeping and nursing your baby to sleep, but also sleep training and scheduling. And usually those things don't coexist. But I found that by marrying the two, like almost everything with parenting, there's some truth to both ways to do it. But if you go hardcore into either ditch, sometimes you lose some things that could be gained.
Yeah, I mean, like
which I tried with our first couple.
Yes.
Like hardcore what?
Well, I was going to say the hardcore co-sleepers. That's like, as the husband, you never get your wife back, I feel like. Like the baby's always between the two of you, or there's always somebody else in the bed. And I'm grateful you're not that way.
Yeah, but it's not the end of the world. Yes. Elisha's not a fan of that. So yeah, like our first babies, well, we'll get to that. So I do kind of a hybrid. Anyway, so after day 3, once the milk comes in, let's see here. Okay. So for 3 days to 3 weeks is kind of another chunk. And I start scheduling my babies on a nursing them every 3 hours from start to start. So this means, if I feed at 3 p.m., then I'm feeding them again at 6 p.m. And it doesn't matter how long I nurse the baby. So like newborns, often you're nursing for like 45 minutes. And if it takes a long time to burp in the middle, then you might be nursing them for an hour. So it's a very short period of time. But whether that baby is nursing...
You mean the break's a short period?
Yeah, the break. But whether I'm nursing for 15 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour, it doesn't matter. I'm nursing from start to start, 3-hour time segments. And even if you're nursing on demand, you're probably not feeding more often than every 2 to 3 hours. So this isn't like a crazy stretch for baby, but it is huge. It makes a huge difference sticking to this. And then if you want, like if you love nursing on demand and that's more your style, you can go back to nursing on demand once your baby's sleeping through the night, and your baby will continue sleeping through the night. So this doesn't have to be like a forever thing either, I found, because there have been seasons when I've nursed more on demand with our kiddos just because that's where my life was at and it wasn't super scheduled. But you do have to be really strict in the beginning if you want baby to sleep through the night. So what I love about this method is you're really only focusing on one thing, and that is scheduling the baby during the day to eat every 3 hours. That is it, because you don't have to worry about this during the night. So when so baby usually gets fussy about 30 minutes before it's time to eat. And this is when you're going to want to hold your baby off. So giving them a pacifier, if you do that, I have this wonderful little bent pinky. I have a short ligament. It works perfect to just hook in there and they suck on that. My mom also has one. We call it the pinky trick. I'm doing it right now.
Wow. As far as like physical traits, that is a very handy one.
God knew, okay? If God did not give you a bent pinky, I am sorry, but you can probably come up with something. So during this time too, I find that my babies often spit up or will continue to burp during this time. And it's just kind of a nice break for their digestion for about 30 minutes before you feed them, instead of feeding all the time. Sometimes what happens when we nurse on demand is air gets stuck in our babies' tummies. They don't have time to process it and burp that up, even after the initial burp. And so it's like milk gets layered upon air, gets more milk, gets more air, and then baby just gets really colicky, Elisha, and uncomfortable. So I find that it's really nice for a baby to have this little break where they're able to process all the food and then they have a really good feeding again. So you are comforting your baby, but you just aren't comforting with food. You're bouncing them, walking around, putting them in a wrap, whatever the case may be. When it comes to night nursing, if they are back to birth weight, so again, you don't want to do anything. You want to continue waking your baby up every 3 hours until they're back to birth weight. But once they're back to birth weight, I let my baby sleep as long as possible during the night. That might be 2 hours at a time. That might be 3 hours. If they go 5 hours, I'll let them go that long. And essentially, I nurse on demand during the night. So anytime they wake up, I feed them. And the baby, as they start to train themselves, as you schedule them during the day, they start to sleep during the night. It's amazing. You don't have to worry about sleep training at nighttime when you're tired and stressed. Something I like to do is burp in between sides, make sure, again, that air isn't getting layered on top of the milk, and keep the lighting really low. I know this sounds obvious, but like our first couple, we had all the lights on. You were up with me some of the times. I mean, it was just this whole dog and pony show. And then we wondered why the baby wouldn't go back to bed, you know? So don't have a phone light. I think reading light's a lot better. And basically what you're doing is, you know, when you're a pregnant mom, you are, and you're laying in bed, baby starts kicking like at 10 and 11 at night. That's when they wake up. And then during the day, you hardly feel any movement. So when baby comes out, they're still on that same schedule. So all you're trying to do is gently flip those schedules. But I want to hone in on the birth weight here for a second, because sometimes sleep is not linear when it comes to training a baby. And so you might have your baby sleep 5 hour stretches or a 4 hour stretch or whatever the case may be after the first couple weeks. And you're like, this is amazing. And then week 3, they go down to like 1.5 hours in between stretches. And you're like, what's going on? Especially if your baby's really lightweight, it's impossible for them to have all the nutrients that they need to sleep through the night. And so you might have bigger dips like that. But if you keep doing the 3 hour scheduling during the day, then your baby will sleep through the night when they hit about 10 pounds. Okay. So they'll have all the tools they need. Their schedule will be reversed, all those things. They just need the weight. And so you have to be patient with this whole process, because it can seem like this isn't working on like weeks 4 or week 5. I actually have a video that I will link down below that I talked about with Lionel. And I go into at the 27-minute mark, I go into exactly on my calendar how many hours he slept at a time. And you can kind of see how it's up and down and up and down. And he hadn't slept more than like 5 hours. And then later that week, he just started sleeping 8, 8, 8, 8. Whoa.
Nice. Really bringing that home there.
For emphasis. Anyways, is everything I said so far
This is great.
true?
I'm just trying to keep track of the time frames. Okay. Cause the first time frame you said was like the first 3 days where you just got to get calories in that baby. And then the next time frame was 3 days to 3 weeks roughly. And that's going to vary as to whether or not the baby's at birth weight or not. And you want to be feeding them as much as you decide when you're feeding them, meaning you feed them as much as possible until they're at birth weight. That's through the night, through the day. And then what's standing out to me is that it's less of sleep training from 3 once they're at birth weight. Mm-hmm. And it's more about it's not about sleep training at nighttime. It's about more like scheduling them during the day that then gets them on a schedule at nighttime.
Nice.
See, I'm paying attention.
You were taking, yeah, you were. Also, we've done this 6 times. You've been very much a part of it with me. Okay, so here's another little tip here, and that is try to keep baby awake at least an hour and a half before you want them to go to bed in the evening. 3 hours is better. So if a baby's drowsy and dozing off, they might go in and out of sleep for a couple hours, but every time it's like their little battery's recharging. So you want to just try to keep them awake during that time. If they're a little fussy, they'll probably be fussy at night. That's when we're putting our other kids to bed. But if Lyman's dozing off, then I might lay him on the carpet, let him startle himself awake, wake himself up, then carry him around for a little bit. And then if he, snuggles up against mommy and falls asleep again, I know this isn't for real sleep. Like he's not ready to go down for the night. So I'm trying to cut that short. All these little like nippy naps right before he goes to bed.
Nice.
Okay. And then, I'm not going to go into that. Okay. At 3 weeks, this is what I've done again for the last 3. I didn't for the first 3 and they did cry because I would put them, what I would do is I would nurse them during the night. I'd immediately put them down in the bassinet and they weren't used to being away from me. And so it was this big, they would only cry for like a minute or 2 or 3, but it feels like forever when you're laying there in bed and you don't think they're ever going to stop and they're so little. And so, I'm laying there and wondering, should I pick them up? Should I soothe them? Should I lay them back down? All that stuff. So up until 3 weeks, so the last 3, I've been doing that whole nurse, let them fall asleep, then move them to the side of me so they get used to the belly. Then I start gradually transitioning them to just nursing in bed and then directly transferring them to their tummy and start trying that. And if it doesn't work, I bring them back to me, comfort them, and then try it again later. Okay. So at first it's nurse, fall asleep next to you, then transfer to tummy. Second stage is nurse, immediately transfer to tummy. And around 3 weeks, I start nursing and immediately putting them in their bassinet. So they're sleeping out of our bed at this stage. And at this point, they're used to going down to their tummy. It's a comfortable position for them, and they immediately go to sleep. Okay, so now I'm going to give you a couple cool things that will help you schedule flexibly, okay? So the first one is the dream feed. So around, maybe anywhere between 8 to 10 weeks, your baby will start to stop going to sleep around 10 or 11 at night, and they'll start wanting to go to sleep earlier. So that might be 9:30, then going to 8:30. Eventually, it's going to end up somewhere around 7 or 7:30. And now you don't want to go to sleep at that point. I'm assuming you don't want to get in bed at 7:30 at night most nights. So it feels like a total ripoff when you put your baby to bed and say, Elisha and I talk for 2 hours, and then we go to bed at 9:30 or 10:30, and I'm like, I'm only going to get a couple hours of sleep, even if he had a good long stretch of sleep. So to solve this problem, enter the dream feed. So the dream feed is you nurse baby, say at 7:30, 8:30, whatever time you put them down, they go to sleep. Then whatever time you get in bed, this might be 1 hour later, this might be 2 hours later, this might be 4 hours later, you bring baby to you and you feed them. Okay. And then you both go to bed together. So that restarts their clock and they will sleep for another solid stretch. So you aren't trying to wait 3 hours or anything like that. You just, after they go to bed, you feed them whenever you get in bed to restart the clock and to get them on another long stretch. Again, this might sound really obvious, but I was really confused on all this stuff with our first few kiddos. Sometimes it's just nice for someone to spell it out for you.
And has that always worked? When you wake them up for a dream feed, they'll go back to sleep?
Yes.
It's not like they're up ready to party?
Yes. So the whole concept of dream feed is, again, keep the lights low, have them like, usually they'll be really sleepy. They won't eat a ton probably at that stage, but it's not like tonight, right? Lyman hadn't gone totally asleep.
Right.
He was kind of in and out. I'm trying to keep him up. So I just fed him right before this podcast, and he was wide awake. So he hasn't gone down for the night yet. But once baby has slept for the night, like they're sleeping, they're going to be totally fine.
Okay.
It totally is a dream feed. Okay. Another little tip is on the other end, and that is setting a start time for your day for the baby. So I was frustrated with my first babies because, say, Lyman got up at 5 a.m, then I'm going, okay, he's up. So I'm counting 3 hours from now, 6, 7, 8. Okay, I'm going to nurse him at 8, and then I'm going to nurse him at 11. But that doesn't work very well for me today because I have to be at a dentist in the dentist chair at 11 o'clock, right? So you don't have to be a slave to your baby's schedule. And this is kind of like the dream feed. You decide whatever 3-hour schedule you want to be on for that day. And so say he wakes up at 5 o'clock to nurse, and then I'm going, you know what? It would be better for me if he nursed at 7. So I'm going to nurse at 7 and then 10 and so on. So even though it's only been a couple hours.
Oh, I see. So you'll feed him at 5. You're not holding him off till 7.
No.
So you feed him
I feed him at 5
and then start again.
So I'll feed him whenever he wakes up for the day. Because again, that early morning feed is a part of the on-demand feeding. I just feed at 4, I feed at 5, whatever time they wake up in the morning. Sometimes it's 6. And then I kind of set my schedule for the day with the next feeding. So say he got up, he slept all the way till 6 and really surprised me. And I'm like, wow, that's incredible. Well, I still want to feed him at 7 o'clock, and I'm going to base my 3 hours off of that. So set your start time based off what works for you during the day. And again, you can fudge this. You can go maybe 15 minutes on either side, maybe 30 minutes on either side as they start sleeping better. But in the beginning, you really want to be as hardcore as you are, is as fast as your baby will transition, I guess. So just keep that in mind. You can kind of drag out this process for a long time if you're letting them sleep random amounts of time and all that stuff. So anyways, set the start time at any time. That's something I didn't realize, and I felt like I was kind of at the mercy of my baby. A couple other things, and then I will let you guys go here, but a couple other things that I get asked about is, how do you keep your supply up? And I can't speak for your supply. I do know every woman's milk supply is going to be different, so I'll let you know what works for me. I'm not an oversupplier, I guess. I have just enough for my babies to a year old. I've always had enough milk until I decide the baby's done nursing or until I get pregnant. So there have been times where I've gotten pregnant and my milk supply tanks while I'm breastfeeding before I hit that year mark. But if I'm not pregnant, then I'm just able to breastfeed 14, 15 months. And sometimes I've done that even though I have been pregnant. So something to keep in mind is it's not necessarily the amount of times your baby latches. It is how long, a cumulative time nursing over the day is what I found. Sometimes when I have nursed back to back to back to back to back, because again, I have gone through seasons of nursing on demand, my milk goes down. It doesn't go up, even though baby is taking these little snacks all day long. Sometimes when they just are a little power sucker and they're on there for 20 minutes and then I burp them and they're on the other side for 20 minutes. And if I feel like I need to keep my milk up, then I go back to the other side, nurse them again, burp, go back to the other side, nurse, burp them again. And I just increase that nursing time and my milk will go up if I feel like baby's having a growth spurt and I need more or something like that. So again, I'm not any doctor or lactation consultant, but just with my 6 kids, that is what has determined baby getting enough food, growing at a really healthy pace, and me keeping my milk supply up. This can also be a lot better anyways, because the fat milk is called your hind milk, which is the last milk that the baby gets to. So having baby nurse, instead of taking all these little tiny snacks where they're just getting this, skim milk, they're able to nurse all the way on both sides. And that gets them all that rich fat milk every time they're feeding and is really good for them. So anyways, I've never had any problems with supply. I can't say that will be the same. I wish I could. You want to feed baby too. Baby's really full. Like maybe if you've nursed on demand with your other kiddos, then you might be like, okay, how long do I nurse a baby if he's going to go 3 hours and be content or the whole time? And you really want baby to be limp, like totally limp, and their hands hanging by their sides. If they're still like sucking on their hands or like all uptight, then they probably still want to eat. And if they aren't latching, then it just means they have air in their belly. So you might need to like burp them, but they are not toast. Like when a baby's milk drunk, they're just out. And okay, they are fat and happy. I can stop. Okay, so a couple last things on naps, because this is another question I get asked a lot, just looking here at my notes. I'm totally fine with baby falling asleep on me, nursing my baby to sleep, having my baby fall asleep in a wrap, all of those things. But around 3 weeks, I do start 1 or 2 naps during the day, putting them down in their bassinet on their tummy, just so they're starting to get used to it. So they're comfortable falling asleep on me, and they're also comfortable falling asleep in their bassinet when they're kind of drowsy. So that will be something I just start to kind of implement to make sure that they don't get too committed to, I only fall asleep when mama's holding me and rocking me. I want them to be able to do it both ways. And again, this isn't a crying, they don't have to cry or anything in their bassinet. It can be a very calm thing, and they just get used to that when they're drowsy. If it doesn't work, then I'll just, when they start to fuss and they're upset, then I'll pick them up and just carry them around with me. Eventually they will learn how to do it within a couple weeks. And the other thing is I forgot that part. Babies have a 45-minute sleep cycle. So this was something that my mom told me after Leon. I couldn't figure out why he would only nap for 30 or 45 minutes. She was like, Katie, usually babies will wake up, they might fuss a little bit, they'll lay back down and sleep for another 45 minutes if you don't pick them up. And so again, this isn't an all-out agitated cry or anything, but this happens where I will be like, this happened literally tonight, which is funny because it must happen a lot, because in the last video I did on sleep training, it had just happened that day or the day before too. But I was in the back room, I was unpacking boxes, and Lyman was crying in the living room. I kind of wanted to finish up what I was doing real quick. So I did, and I went out to the living room, and he's just out. And he slept for another, I don't know how long, but he slept for another chunk of time. So that's a little tip. If your baby's not taking longer naps, maybe see if you can hold off for a minute and see if they'll put themselves back to bed, because they might want to do that.
Nice.
Okay, I think that's it. There are other things that I did talk about. If you are trying to do this with like an older child, 4 months, 9 months, 16 months, whatever the case may be, that will be a totally different story. Okay, so just know that you can do it. There will be crying involved if you're using this method, because they're just on whatever rhythm they're used to. It's going to be hard to get them onto another rhythm. I talk a little bit about sleep regressions and some other things in that other video I filmed after Lionel. It's not on the podcast. I'll link it down below. It was on YouTube though. And you guys can see there's a lot of repeat information in that, but there's also towards the end, there's just some things that I think could be helpful if you have maybe an older child or if your baby starts to regress but yeah, that's what's working for us. And I could not be happier. Like the first time I thought it was kind of luck. The second time I thought it was because Lionel was such a chunky baby, but Lyman was like average. He was 7 pounds, and he has been a little dream.
Yes. I cannot believe how quickly he got on this routine of sleeping for solid chunks at a time. And sleep is a game changer. Fatigue makes cowards of us all, as the saying goes. And oftentimes, you bear the brunt of it as the mother, because you're up multiple hours at a time throughout the night. But it affects the whole household. Usually the husband's not sleeping as well too. And then, the husband then carries a heavier load to try to support the fatigued wife. And so when you can solve that problem sooner rather than later, it just brings so much life to the home.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those things where it doesn't have to be a big thing or a hard thing. It can just happen really naturally, honestly. Because it's not like babies don't want to sleep.
Right. You have to still be intentional. It is natural, but it's still, you're showing intentionality.
Yes, you are. And I guess I would encourage you, like there's nothing
unnatural.
Right. Yeah. About having a baby that sleeps through the night instead of sleeping during the day. Like they aren't nocturnal. Yeah. They will eventually sleep through the night. And so it's just going to be a matter of teaching them how to do that. And at a certain age, because of school, because of activities, because of whatever the case may be, you being out and about with a 2-year-old, they eventually are up enough during the day that they want to sleep during the night.
Right.
But this just can help accelerate that process.
Nice. You rock, Katie. That is impressive stuff. And I'm so grateful for how much, intentionality you've shown in all of our children. But like you said, especially the last 3, it's just been a very expedited process in getting them to sleeping for these chunks at a time, which is just a blessing to our home. So thank you.
Yeah. And like if Elisha and I look tired, it's because of our life during the day, not because of Lyman during the night. We get sleep. It's just our days are giant right now. So thank you guys for listening. And thank you, Elisha, for letting me talk so much.
Are you kidding me? That was a treat. You did all the work. Appreciate it. Folks, we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.